Hi listeners, thanks again for joining for another episode in my Ellevate series with your host, me, Becky. In this podcast, we talk about all things women empowerment, challenges in the recruitment industry, career progression, and anything else that is empowering women in business. Thanks for listening, and please remember to follow and subscribe for all updates. Thank you so much for joining today. I'm joined with Michal. We've been chatting for a few weeks now. Michal has come to a couple of our events before in the past, and really keen to dive into this topic and discuss resiliency, what it means for her, and go from there. So Michal, thank you so much for joining today. I'm looking forward to this discussion.
So first of all, thank you very much, Becky. I'm very, very happy to be here.
Yeah, do you want to start out by giving a bit of an introduction to yourself for our listeners?
Yeah, my name is Michal, as you said. Originally, I'm from Israel, Tel Aviv. I've relocated to Berlin around 5 years ago, and I've been working in digital marketing for the previous 13 years. In which I held very different roles, I would say. But as of for today, I'm the head of product marketing at Mondu and also the Berlin Product Marketing Alliance ambassador.
Fabulous. Thank you so much. So let's jump into it then, Michal. So what exactly does resilience mean to you?
Well, for me, resilience is a key factor in today's world. I think both in leadership position, but also, just as human beings, right? But in terms of work, resilience is basically the process, an outcome of successfully adapting to difficult or challenging life experience, right? So maybe we can just give kind of like a higher level definition. And it requires a mental and emotional behavioral flexibility. And I believe that today, resilience is super important in the job, market and the industry and how things are kind of like going at the moment. So again, resilience is kind of like a key factor, I believe, at least for me.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, it's been a bit of a roller coaster the last few years. So it definitely comes into play more and more these days. But why do you think it's important in general in the workplace or outside?
I think that it's really important because it's basically, the ability not to fall under pressure. And I think that, if something kind of like really, define today's world is that we are all operating in times of uncertainty. So we really don't know how to navigate, right? So let's be honest, ever since 2020, when COVID hit, the world changed, right? So it doesn't matter, if we needed to recover from lockdowns or to get, on board with working remotely, something that I think that we never even imagined or even thought about, in 2016, right? So that's something that we're really kind of like new and we were introduced to this concept. And nevertheless, we still needed to operate. And I think that resilience was, kind of like key factor, like COVID is a great example, but not only COVID, right? So when you're, especially in leadership positions, you have to develop resiliency in order, to navigate well, to lead your team, to navigate yourself, to decompress from stress, right? So there's a lot of factors also into resiliency.
Yeah, absolutely. There's been a number of major things that have happened in the last, 3+ years, right? We've had the COVID, the pandemic, the war, the economic recession, the uncertainty in the market, lack of funding, a lot of startups facing uncertain and challenging times when it's come to hiring as well. So I think the reality is, it's been a lot, and it's probably been a lot to take on for a lot of people. So I think, as you say, resilience is super important. And I like how you put it, like the flexibility to handle different situations, for sure. Regarding the workplace, have you seen the environment change as you've progressed, which has kind of maybe caused you to evolve how you display resiliency as well, and how that might have changed or evolved?
Yeah, so this is a super relevant question. So thank you very much for bringing this up. I think that most common situation in startups at the moment, and of course I come, more from kind of like the startups and even more to say early stage startup, right? In which you really need to develop resiliency, stay at your core, right? And really be confident in how you deliver and operate. But I think that again, in early stage startups, it's the need to pivot, right? Especially when you have this type of kind of like uncertainties. So I think that most companies are still, like either searching for product market fit. And I, of course, encounter this type of situation, or, just going to the normal, defining your ICP and target audience and learning the industry, right? And the customer pain points. So that's something that I can definitely say that I've been handling. So, kind of like you're working on a certain, roadmap or OKRs, and then suddenly you need to shift. There's a shift. You need to pivot. You need kind of like to even maybe kill some projects. And I think that that's, really requires resilience, right? Because people and team members also tend to fall in love in a project. And then, like when it's time to kill it because this is not the right direction or this is not the right time to operate, it requires a lot of flexibility. So resilience, of course, but also, like in leadership position, you need to navigate your team through this. And through this new strategy, and you need to prioritize now, like the workload, and sometimes even handle a much higher workload, right? And you need to still remain positive, operate with empathy, and regulate your emotions. So it is a lot, right? Like it's not only about like you anymore, it's also about your team, and it's about the business objectives and about how you kind of like tie all of this together.
Absolutely. I think, sometimes you have to take on slightly more of that burden just to kind of keep peace with the team. When those changes are happening, you kind of have to face it yourself, but then you also have to provide a bit of, I guess, a safety net or comfort for the team, just to sort of say like, look, we're going to get through this, whatever the change might be or the pivot. And sometimes you have to kind of be okay with the fact that you're not really sure it's okay, but remain resilient for the team just to kind of keep it going, right? So it's a tough task, I think, to be able to go between the two. So I guess resiliency is an interesting one, because I think some people, from my perspective, I think can be quite naturally resilient. I think, depending on what life experiences they might have been through or how they've been raised, or whereas other people, maybe they have to kind of work at it, and maybe they don't have such a natural thick skin, shall we say. So if this doesn't like maybe come naturally to someone, how do you think people can maybe develop that trait?
We need to perceive resiliency as if it was a muscle, right? So, like you can train and develop it, and it's a trait. So just like in sports. And I think that there are a few ways to develop resiliency. Of course, I'm no expert, and I think that like there is multiple books, right, on how to develop resiliency, but I can definitely share what's worked for me.
Yeah.
First thing is practice positive thinking, right? So talk positively to yourself and about yourself. So it's both internal and external work. So really kind of like develop positive way of thinking. Then think short term. So focus on here and now, not like, like where I want to be in 5 years, right? So really when you endure a very difficult or stressful, challenging situation, I think it's, like practicing being in the moment. It's the best thing that you can do for yourself. Of course, another tip that I can share is do not compare yourself to others, right? So don't go like on social media and say, oh, everyone are having fun, or LinkedIn, like when people say, hey, very excited and thrilled to share that I just, land on a new opportunity, and you're kind of like, struggling or having this type of like challenging patch. So focus on what you can do to change the situation. So really remain at your core. I would also say that what really helps me is to debrief. I love debriefing. I love, kind of like reverse engineering and to really analyze the situation, not in order, kind of like to overthink, but more, to develop new ideas about what I can learn from a situation, even if it's a very tough situation, right? I definitely believe that we can gain learnings from any situation, especially very hard and difficult situations.
Yeah, exactly. And I also like your point around, okay, no matter what the tough situation is, there's potential to turn it into a positive and learn something from it. When you're hiring people, do you look for resilience in their past and how they've maybe addressed that, whether it be personal or work-wise? What kind of questions do you think you could ask?
And yes, of course, I look for people with resilience, especially because, again, like my niche is early stage startup. I do not believe that someone with no resiliency, can thrive in a startup atmosphere, especially not, like hyper growth, for example. And the way that I will try to detect that is basically, through behavioral questions. So really asking like, okay, can you share a stressful situation or a challenging situation that you had to endure in life, work related or not work related, right? And then how did you operate? What were your key learnings from that? And then, from that answer, of course, it's not easy to assess because these interviews are very short and everyone wants to be super impressive, but you can still detect, kind of like from different behavioral questions, how the person operates, or maybe even just like how they react to the question, right? Another thing that I love to ask is kind of like, tell me about a time when you had difficulty with your manager or with a colleague, because I believe that that's also, revolve resiliency. Like, how do you operate when things don't go well, right? So the idea here is not, like to only check like the social traits or skills and communication ways, but maybe more kind of like, really, how do you operate when things are not going as you want them to be or as you even envisioned them to be, right? And that's, I think that that's also something that, by the way, practicing resilient can help, because whenever I encounter, like something new, or even like offering like a new project at work, I'm trying to imagine to myself, okay, what can possibly, go wrong here? And again, not like to overthink, but kind of like to assess the risk, and then also to understand how will I operate, and already to envision, how will I operate in difficulty.
Yeah, absolutely. It's difficult, right? Because as you say, especially in an interview process, everyone wants to put their best foot forward, but actually sometimes you have to say, well, something didn't go well, and this is how I remained resilient in that point in time. So I think that helps you kind of build a bit of rapport with your potential incoming employees as well, which is interesting. So yeah, look, I think it's fair to say that the last few years in the office have been a bit of a roller coaster for a lot of companies, for a lot of employees, and obviously for employers as well. How have you experienced this? And, when did you need to display resilience through the last few years?
First of all, I think that at the moment, many leaders experience similar situations, right? So the need to change the business strategy, pivot and target new audience, launching new products, I don't know, that you didn't even think about, releasing yet to meet the market expectation. But actually, for me, the last 2 years were very unique because you wouldn't believe that. But actually, when I started working at Mondo, I was actually doing a renovation process with my house. So me and my family were about to move into a new house. Very exciting, right? Like we made the purchase, we renovated it. Should be, a great moment in life. But actually what happened was very unexpected, because a week before we needed to go on the, big move, a pipe burst in our kitchen, which flooded our entire house after we renovated it. So we literally had no place to live. And also, the house that we just finished renovated was completely demolished, and we needed to fix that. I was just starting to work at Mondo, and I needed to establish my team at Mondo as well. And no one knew me yet, so no one could, say, look, she's great, but she's under extreme pressure, because also I did not share so much about it, right? So I needed to perform, and I needed, kind of like to act fast when I had no uncertainty about, where am I going to live, right? And that's something that you just cannot foresee, you cannot foresee that that's going to happen to you.
Yeah, of course not.
But what I actually chose to do is to acknowledge this situation. And I was very clear and informing with myself. And I said something like, you know what, this is hard. I'm going through a really, really tough patch, but I will get through it. I'm strong, and I will find my way to navigate in it. So I started to really break down, everything into plans, and develop multiple roadmaps, not only, like for my professional life, but also in personal. And I created my 30, 60, 90 days plan, and I shared it with my direct manager. So we aligned on the goals and my vision. So it was very clear what I needed to achieve in order to reach success. And it really helped me out, because holding to what I know that I can deliver and work while having complete uncertainty in my private life, right? Think about the massive, mental capacity. And I really needed to endure that. And I think that my first quarter at Mondo was one of the best I had in my life, eventually, performance-wise, because I really kept to my core, I stuck to my plan, and I needed, to display enormous resilience. And it, this experience actually made me so much more stronger. I know it sounds crazy, right?
Amazing. Wow. Yeah, that is that just sounds stressful just to hear about. Even just one part of that is stressful, but then to have it all kind of bubble up together is kind of crazy. But yeah, wow. I can certainly see how that you could look back on that and think, okay, I was in a really tough situation and I made a plan, I stuck to the plan, I got through it. And then I guess it gives you a bit of confidence to move forward. Hopefully you're not going to be in that exact same situation ever again. That would be disastrous, but I'm sure there will be times when, you know, you have to bring back that resilience and bring back that mechanism, I suppose, now, and you kind of know it works to deal with the stress. So on that, I guess, stress management, do you have any other like coping mechanisms or specifics that helped you at that point in time and or other times as well that you could share?
So I would say the first thing is to prioritize, really prioritize and plan. I would also say set healthy boundaries, you know, so really kind of like know your limits, but also communicate your limits. It's also very crucial, you know, in order to be able to manage stress well. Then create space for yourself. So whether it's through journaling, sports, riding a bike, or whatever really makes you feel, you know, good. And I'm not talking about watching, you know, guilty pleasure reality TV show, because that will be more of like a you know, escape route. But you know, really find a space for yourself to clear your mind, to be with yourself, to you know, to calm yourself down, right? Like to decrease the noise. So for me, what really helps is Pilates. And it really takes the space for myself to decompress. Otherwise, yeah, I wouldn't be able to endure all of this.
I have some similar mechanisms to
Yeah.
cope with it. I think it helps. Bit of yoga, bit of meditation when I can. It's one of those that's easy to push to the side when you're busy, right? But of course, that's the easy thing to do. But after you do it, you always know, like, okay, that was worth it. I need to do this more. So I guess building that habit in is super important. Difficult when you're busy and you know, you have to, as you say, prioritize. Sometimes that gets to push to the bottom of the list.
Yeah.
But it's about being able to ensure that you can still prioritize those things because they definitely do help. So I guess as leaders, it's important to be brave during the tougher times. We kind of touched on that already, and obviously remain resilient in front of your team. You sometimes have to be that boundary, that safety net, that, you know, blanket in a way. But do you think there's also a place for vulnerability as well in the workplace?
Yes, but I think that it really depends on the work culture and how comfortable you feel with your team. I think that, you know, like I'm not a big believer in oversharing, especially not at work.
Yeah.
So again, there is place for vulnerability as long as you're not creating any burden on your team, right? So your team or direct manager, you know, that like they're not like your psychologist, right? So you need also to refrain from that. And I think that, you know, it's fine to show vulnerability, and it's even important to a certain extent, because in the end of the day, we're all human. And we need to remember that, you know, we all have our limits. But I think that's something that I would maybe communicate with my team. And I think that I did communicate it, you know, like maybe a few months into, you know, like my work with Mondu, that I am going through some hardship at the moment. But we will get through that, you know, like as a team, I mean.
Yeah, for sure. I think, as you say, there has to be the time and the place. You need to have sustainability in your leadership, right? You know, you don't want to be a burden to the team. So it's kind of knowing like when you can share those things. But I think there's also probably a limit to what you can take on. So it's also probably an element of knowing when to say no, or knowing how far you can push yourself or take yourself and whatever the situation might be. Because then the flip side is you also don't want to put too much pressure on yourself to the point of, yeah, you may be burning out or causing further challenges down the road. Obviously, the working in the tech startup scale-up scene in Berlin, the last year, really, the tech layoffs in recent times have certainly added to stress and obviously uncertainty to everyone's career. How does this add to like a personal stress? I think from both the side, obviously, if you made redundant or laid off, then you obviously have a direct challenge of, you know, finding a new role. But also, if your colleagues are laid off, I think, you also have a situation where your workload might change, might increase, might need to focus on different areas. How have you coped with that, learning new skills and having to take on different avenues that you perhaps originally signed up for?
Yeah, so first of all, I think that it's a super relevant topic. And probably a lot will be written about this, going forward, because I think that, like tech layoffs has been crazy. We've really kind of like witnessed, even the largest companies, right, suffering from layoffs. So whether it's Google and Meta and Klarna and, like multiple companies that had like, even several layoff waves. And of course, it affects like our mentality, and it does add up to the stress, like to your question. And I think that the zeitgeist is to operate in times of uncertainty, and this really requires that you will stay on top of your game, right? So whether it's learning new skills, maintaining a strong network, for me, I think that that's something that works best, both internally and externally. We need, like the people behind us, not only to share, but also to acknowledge that you're not alone, like in this situation, you're not alone managing or suffering all this stress. It's not only your company, it's other companies, right? So there's multiple factors into that as well. And I think that also one effect is, of course, that after layoffs, the workload also increases, right? And even if you survived, the layoff, it means that you need to adjust now to a new team structure, new responsibilities, and it's not an easy period.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's quite easy to argue that being laid off, you're in an immediate worse situation than not. But yeah, I think sometimes people kind of forget about the people who are having to also go through that, who are still employed, like whether you're having to have those conversations, make those decisions, which are never nice. It's always a difficult conversation and something to go through as well. Of course, I'm not saying that that's worse than losing your job, but I think sometimes that can get overlooked, and it can contribute to more burnout and stress. And so I think ultimately having to remain resilient and almost have to remain positive again in that leadership role for the remaining employees. It's tough, but as you say, I think I like your point around reach out to your network, because the reality is a lot of people are going through that as well, and it's quite nice to have a bit of a comfort to hear from others who've how they've gone and how they managed it. And ultimately sharing stories is a helpful part of that as well, right?
Definitely. I also think that that there's an opportunity in every situation.
Yeah.
So whether you've been laid off, so that's open, new opportunities, because maybe you can find yourself in different roles, right? Different companies that, I don't know, you weren't even planning to do. Maybe you can learn something all completely new, right? So that's like more for the people that've been laid off. And then for the remaining team, so you get more responsibilities. That actually means that you're gaining much more experience, right? And new skills through work. And that's another, massive thing, right? Because I don't know, maybe you started as a content writer, but now you're doing, I don't know, a different and all completely, different type of job. Or I don't know, you started in marketing operations, but now you're also doing revenue operations, and, kind of like this whole team mixture and kind of like cross training to a certain extent, right? And remaining agile. I actually think that that's a positive thing, right? Because again, especially in startups, I'm not quite sure about what's happening in corporate, because I never worked at a corporate, by the way. But like this attitude or mentality that like, I came here to do this job, I don't think that that's the right attitude in nowadays. So you need to remain flexible, and even if you're given more work, that's actually quite good.
Yeah, it's an opportunity, as you say.
Right? So you can either come and say, oh, I have like so much work now and I don't even like that, right? The other hand, you can say, that's actually great.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's oftentimes that you hear like success stories coming out of hardship times. So I think people who remain resilient through that often find like the silver lining, which is good to hear. Let's chat about your experience of moving to Berlin. How have you found it at first?
So at first I didn't like it at all. I have to be honest. So I was in complete shock, and I just, like I got here and I was like, this is so different, also from Tel Aviv. And in Tel Aviv, we have a beach and sun all the time, right? And I think that like Berlin is the complete opposite, because usually it's very gray here. And of course, you don't have like the nice beach as a comfort. But now, after 5 years, I have to say that I really love actually living here. So another surprise in life, because at first I was like, no, this is not going to work out. Yeah.
I mean, I can see why you would miss Tel Aviv as well, for sure. But yeah, Berlin has definitely got its pluses.
I have to be honest and say that we moved here, me and my partner, and I moved here without any job. So that's crazy. Usually people relocate when they have something. We literally had no, opportunity and nothing. We just really kind of like took a leap in life. And I needed to reinvent myself and really to rebuild and frame my work experience, right? Because I did not work in the German market.
Yeah.
I worked, usually when you work in Tel Aviv, so either you work with the local Israeli market or overseas with the US market, but that's not European market. So there's, nuance and of course, differentiation points between markets. And, you need to get to know the industry, the culture. And, that really requires developing resilience. And you get tons of rejection at first, whether you apply for a flat or for a job, and
Yeah.
kind of like, that could be a very hard experience. So yeah, you need to remember that you're not playing in your home game, right? This is not like kind of like your normal atmosphere, and you still need to remain calm and positive. So
yeah, exactly. So do you have any tips for others who are considering or who have just recently moved, not necessarily to Berlin, but to a new city?
Yeah. So I believe that, like relocation is relocation. It doesn't matter if it's to Germany or for different countries. For me, I think that the best tip that I can give is to have patience. Like it takes time to get to know a new place. It takes time to get to know a new culture, rebuild yourself, right? Rebuild and establish network, friendships. You're outside of your comfort zone. And I would even say that sometimes you need to unlearn certain things, right? Because kind of like the cards that you used to have in your hands in your homeland, right? Maybe they don't mean anything in the new market or in the new environment. So you really need to have, like a clean set of mind and to lower expectations, right?
Yeah, I like that. Like unlearning some things. Of course, it's good to remain true to yourself and like who you are and remember all the positive things. But yeah, I think going in with an open mind is obviously important, especially if it's such a different culture to what you knew before, and kind of embracing it, I guess. Nice. And in terms of tips, what kind of tips do you think you would have for your younger self if you were to look back and, your first day of your first job of, starting your career? What kind of tips would you give yourself?
So I think that now I would say that I should aim for larger companies like when I was younger, because it's very interesting, but I never work in a corporate. I already mentioned that. And I'm taking higher risks and really all the time going to like early stage startups. And I hadn't had, like this kind of like internship experience when you join a team and you shadow a team. I was like really kind of like pushed immediately to like becoming like a team leader and really establishing processes and functions and everything really from the get-go, when sometimes I kind of like still was kind of like inventing myself as a young adult. So that was interesting, but I think that I would have benefit also from a much more calmer maybe path and really joining a team and having some guidance and not kind of like being hardcore maybe all the time. So yeah.
Nice. And I guess, Michal, if you were to look back, do you have any sort of standout moments in your career that you feel really shaped kind of who you are today?
Yeah, so I would say that happened when we relocated to Berlin, and actually we're relocating, and then I decided also to open my own business. So I started offering consultancy services, and that was kind of like one of the strategies to get to know the market, because I thought to myself, okay, if like applying through CVs and getting like my foot at the door in that way, in that more conservative way, does not work, then I'll try another angle, and that will actually be to become a consultant. And then I thought to myself, okay, once a company will get to know me and they're not committing to me, right? Like I will just provide some consultation, then the magic will happen. And that was a really kind of like life-changing moment, because I was never a business owner. I never wanted to be a business owner, right? I mean, like, I don't know, some people, it's their dream. It wasn't one of my aspirations. And actually that turned out to be pretty great. So again, I was thrown into a very, like uncertainty or kind of like deep water. And I swam. And yeah, that was very shaping.
Amazing. Very cool. Nice. Perfect. Well, yeah, today's been an awesome conversation, Michal. I've really enjoyed getting to the bottom of, I guess, your resilience, why it's important, how it shaped you, and also how it's kind of shaped your career. I guess the last kind of fun question is, where's next on your vacation bucket list?
So actually, Portugal. I really want to visit Portugal for so long now. I don't know, like everyone are talking about it.
Cool. Well, I'll look forward to hearing about it once you go. But yeah, thank you so much, Michal. It's been an amazing conversation. I'm sure our listeners will be excited to tune in for this one. And we will catch up again soon.
Thank you. Ciao.